is profound from so many different perspectives, and it's actually the solution to the problems of the world that we live in today. But unfortunately, it's not being seen as that, and a lot more things as we go along, inshallah. So without further ado, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Arslan. How are you? How's things?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, very good. Thank you for having me on your show.
No, you're more than welcome, bro. It's a pleasure to have you on, inshallah. Sabur, how are you, bro?
Alhamdulillah.
Brilliant. Okay, so Sabur, Arslan, you guys have done a few shows together already, mashallah, on Darwinian delusions. This is the first time we're covering this topic on epistemics. So the very first thing I want you guys to do is, starting with Brother Arslan, is to give us a sort of summary of what's going on, assuming that the people online right now know very little, which is not the case, obviously, because we know this information has been coming out left, right, and center, Muslim, non-Muslim, streams, news outlets, etc. It's well known. However, assuming that people don't know much about it, please give us a summary of what's going on, bro, inshallah.
So a quick summary would be quoting the expert Adrian Zenz on this. He says it's the largest collective engagement or entrapment or killing of the largest group of people since the Holocaust. So the last time we've seen anything like this was back in World War II with the Jews. So we have a Muslim population called the Uyghurs in Chinese occupied East Turkestan, where around anywhere between 1 to 3 million Uyghur Muslims. Some organizations have put the figure up to 5 million Uyghur Muslims are arbitrarily detained in these concentration camps, and these people are put through indoctrination, forcefully. They are made to forget their religion, forget their culture, and become one with the broader Han Chinese society, and to be essentially forgotten in the world. And they are, and some of the tortures that we're through torture methods, people are dying en masse, but it's all in secret. So unfortunately, we're not getting, even though people know about it, we're not getting the gruesome films that you would see coming out of Rohingya or Syria, and sometimes even Palestine, where people are at a crossroads as to what to do, because you have the possibly the strongest nation in the world, if we still consider the US to be the strongest superpower in the world, and yet, because they are so strong, that they are not like an Iraq or a Syria or an Afghanistan or a Burma, where you can just push them over with a few sanctions. Yes, so they seem to be, so we're in this situation where it's literally, that's why we compare it to World War II, because Germany was of that sort of status and keeping things under wraps, and it wasn't until the Allies went in and saved the Jews that it didn't end. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very briefly, that's what's happening.
Sabur, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Like from an external perspective now, because we've got the on the ground view. I want to know what you see from the outside, bro.
So, as you know, Muslims across the world are being oppressed. That's without a shadow of a doubt. But the oppression in East Turkestan is in its own class. And I would not equate it to the oppression in Palestine. I would not equate it to the oppression that's happening in, say, Yemen or happening in other places. And the reason for it is that in no particular country do we have anything but a dispute, essentially, which is sectarian in nature or political in nature, and religion as a tertiary or secondary thing. So, for example, what you find with the regime of Bashar al-Assad is that he's trying to posit himself as a Muslim. He's trying to say that, look, I'm just against extremism, and he has no problem, with, openly at least, with saying, I want to end Islam, or Islam is a virus, right? Mm-hmm. And when we look at the Israelis, it's very clear that, Netanyahu does not want to end Islam. In fact, he's happy to, work with certain Muslim countries. His aim is to basically, no problem with Palestinians as long as they're not in the West Bank and Gaza, just kick them out. But he's not there indoctrinating Palestinians to say La ilaha, to say there is no God. And in my conversation with the previous concentration camp survivor, because I've done 2 through the help of Arsalan now, the first one, when she was actually sent to this camp, they used to teach her that there is no Allah. And every day when she was leaving the class, she had to the teacher would ask questions to the effect of, is there Allah? And she had to say no. If she hesitated, she would get beaten. So this is indoctrinating people for state atheism, which is something we saw in the early part of the 20th century. It didn't work. And now we're seeing the same thing that the Soviets were doing. The only difference is in cruelty, in barbarism, and in pure mercilessness. It's the same thing, but just on steroids. They want instant results, when I think the Soviets were probably more reasonable and more realistic about their torturous regime than the Chinese are.
Yeah, you know what? There is a lot of parallel as you guys are speaking about this now. The sort of background I did amongst what's going on currently in East Turkmenistan and in Soviet Russia, or the Soviet Union, the communist Russia. There are so many parallels, bro. And there's a brilliant book. It's called The Plot to Kill God. And what's very interesting about this book, it's written by a sociologist, professor in sociology, by Paul Froisi. I think that's how you say his name. And essentially what he does, he takes a sociological analysis of what actually happened on the ground. What was going on, why it was happening, were they successful, why weren't they successful, etc., etc. And I want to do a lot of comparison and back and forth in regards to what happened then and what's happening now, because I think it's very important to look at history as well from this perspective, because history gives us insights in regards to, okay, if something didn't work then why do you assume it's going to work now, right? And therefore, why follow in the same footsteps? But before we get to that, I want to really flush out why this is happening now. What is the reason, Brother Arsalan, this is taking place? All of this imprisonment and the imprisonment that's taking place today it's on, like Sabur said, it's on a whole different scale. This isn't a couple of people, this isn't a handful of people. These are new camps which are being set up on a daily basis. Thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people are being tortured, beaten, imprisoned. It's almost house arrest in a way as well, like you mentioned before, and as is common knowledge now, that there are people that are being made to live with these Muslim families, and they can come in and out of the houses whenever they wish to see if they're actually complying, and if they, if you like, Islam and their religion and the identity of these people is being pulled out from these people enough. Why is this happening, bro? What is the underlying reason for this?
The underlying reason is that the Uyghurs are the original owners of the land. So if we go back, we don't want to go back thousands of years to Oghuz Khan and we don't want to go back that far. But if we go from, say, when the Turks, the Uyghurs are Turkic people, and the people, especially I've seen recently that the Pakistanis are really into Ertugrul. Right now, the Chinese regime are killing Ertugruls. So we are just before Ertugrul. So in 934, the Uyghur Muslims accept Islam. And so for the next few hundred years, Islam is spread throughout Turkestan, or East Turkestan. And Turkestan as a whole, this is the land of Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, Imam Tirmidhi. So this is what you got to be thinking. And so we're just towards the east part of that. And so it's not until 1760 where the Manchu Empire, the first sort of Chinese empire, take us over, and they unofficially name us Xinjiang. Okay, they unofficially name us, and it's not for another 70 odd years. We don't get our independence back, and then that's short-lived. And during that, this is about 1870. During this short-lived time, we actually give bay'ah, or our allegiance to the Ottoman Empire. So we've always had our qibla, or our direction, not towards Beijing, but always towards towards Mecca, towards our Turkic brothers in Central Asia, towards the Middle East. I mean, look at the way we look. I mean, the way that I look now is how, generally speaking, how Uyghur Muslims look. We are not Chinese at all, despite what the Chinese might say. And we've established 2 governments in, say, modern history. In 1933, the East Turkestan Islamic Republic. That was short-lived. That only went for about a year. But there was a tussle for the next 10 years, and we were able to actually establish the second East Turkestan Republic with the help of the Soviets, would you believe? And that was for another 5 years until we were taken over by Communist China in 1949. Now, the oppression started really in 1949 onwards. It wasn't just these past 3 years, whether it be the language, our script, because we were using Arabic script, just like in Urdu or the Uthmanis. And then they changed that to Latin. So you had a whole generation of Uyghurs become illiterate overnight. And then within a 15, 20-year period, again, in 1981, they changed it back. They changed it back to Arabic script. So, for example, my mother's generation learned Latin script, whereas my wife's generation learned, which is the generation now, learned Arabic script. So my mom's Latin script, my wife's generation Latin script, Arabic script. And then from then even, so the separating of, I mean, I can understand separating religion from state, but trying to separate religion from all part of your life, not even being able to say Assalamu alaikum. And so whenever I tell people sort of misunderstand. They go, oh, are they attacking Islam? No, they're not necessarily attacking Islam. Islam is a part of the Uyghurs' identity. And what I mean by that, many people don't understand, is that when two Uyghurs come together, and they could be the most irreligious Uyghurs in the world, but when they meet each other, they'll actually greet each other with Assalamu alaikum, which just means, it's gotten to that stage where it just means like, how are you? Okay. And it wasn't up until 2017, 2018, other Muslim groups like the Hui Muslims generally live quite freely. Some of these areas within China, not East Turkestan, some of these areas are like Saudi Arabia, like old Saudi Arabia. I'm talking women in niqab, madrasas, adhan on the street. But even now, for the past 2 years, they've also been subjected to similar practices or implementations against their faith, against their culture as well. So it's not outright, because the Chinese, we talked about this yesterday, the Chinese regime supports the Palestinian cause, would you believe?
Yeah, there are all these disparities that are going. It's very hard to sort of tie all the ends in sometimes together. But what you're essentially saying, that it's not only Islam, it's the whole culture. It's everything that the people are about that's being stripped from them. Now, I want you to elaborate, and both of you to elaborate, maybe get some Subur to chime in here as well. What is that? Why do that anyway? Why want to remove someone's identity to such an extent that they're no longer them, right? What is the thinking here? What's going on?
So basically, it's to say that we're saying that's our country, that's our land.
Yeah.
And for example, over time, we become Chinese, we become one with them, we won't have Uyghur people to fight for an independent nation. Like you would need Uyghurs to ask for a Uyghur nation, an Uyghur country. If we're all mixed, and now there's forced marriage, why are they forcefully marrying women and men, and they are paid? Some of these people, the Chinese are given money. They are paid thousands of yuan to do this. Why would you bother? So I always couple this with what happened back in my country, Australia, where they had the White Australia policy, where they forced, where they took children, brought them up in Chinese homes, and they forced the black Aboriginal women to marry the white Australian men. And you will see now, and this was under the White Australia policy, but what we know now as the stolen generation. So now you see white Australians, but they're essentially Aboriginal in blood, fight for the rights of the Aborigines. Obviously, the Aborigines are not fighting for an independent nation, but yeah, this is what they're trying to. So have a look at Australia to an extent.
Okay, brilliant. Subur,
and that went on for 60 years.
SubhanAllah.
So, what we have to understand fundamentally is the Prophet ﷺ spoke about the Turks. Okay, so the problem with East Turkestan, it goes back to the lips of the Prophet ﷺ. right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he made it very clear to the Muslims that they had to fight the Romans, they had to fight the Persians, they had to fight the mushriks in Arabia. And later on, the Prophet prophesied that you will be fighting the Indians. So we have this clear in the narrations of the Prophet ﷺ. But the Prophet ﷺ told us something very different about the Turks. The Prophet said, do not fight them unless they fight you first, which is very peculiar if you think about it. Now, I checked this out, I researched this. This is a Sahih narration. And what we do know is that after the Battle of Talas, which is a battle which took place in the 8th century between the the Abbasids and the Tang dynasty, that the Tang dynasty actually had Turkic people as allies. The Turkic people at that point were not Muslim. They were simply allies with the Chinese, and they were wars between them, and they were rivalries and alliances and all of this. So what happened is, when this battle took place between the Muslims and the Chinese, the Turkic people did not fight. They actually betrayed the Chinese in favor of the Muslims, which led to the Tang dynasty losing. And after the battle, the Turkic people became Muslim. They started becoming Muslim, and these Turkic tribes, they started giving dawah to the other Turkic tribes, and then you get the rise of basically Islam all over Greater Turkestan, which involves all the people that Arslan was mentioning, the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, the Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and including East Turkestan. So all of these areas, and then you have that movement because of Mongol invasions into Europe, and then you get the rise of the Ottomans, right? So all of these people, I want everybody to recognize, it's all the same group. It's all the Turkic people. And the Prophet ﷺ, what's amazing in this narration is that he is telling us there's something about these people, and these people accepted Islam without being conquered. This is very important to understand. Not only did they do that, they're the only people that went on to establish an Islamic empire, the Ottomans, right? And if you look into their culture, Central Asian culture, their culture is intertwined with Islam. Everywhere you go in these areas, like Arsalan mentioned. So people who are committed to Islam, people who've given up their lives for Islam, people whose ancestors are warriors, are extremely dangerous for the Chinese criminal regime, which has overtaken Free East Turkestan. Because fundamentally, if these people know about their history, if they can see that they're distinct, they only need to turn one page in history and see that their ancestors were warriors, and that they repeatedly were a pain and a thorn in the side of every person that tried to stand up against Islam. And you will essentially see a rebellion, and you will see China itself suffering. And there's a reason why China is desperate to keep East Turkestan under its grip. East Turkestan is the jugular vein of China's economy. Their economy, 80% of the cotton comes from East Turkestan. Many other places, many other resources, they actually steal from East Turkestan. East Turkestan, if it was an independent nation, then China would not be able to get any of the oil or any of the gas or any of these things from Central Asia, which is worth trillions. So there's geopolitical reasons, geostrategic reasons why China must keep hold of East Turkestan. In fact, Chinese professors are open about this. And what we need to keep in our mind is that why this particular cause is a cut above all the rest of the causes is for the simple reason that the brutality of the Chinese, I truly believe, if nothing is done in the next 20 years, there will be no Uyghur people. There will be no Uyghur people. And I promise everybody watching this, if 20 years from now, nothing changes, we will talk about East Turkestan the way we talk about Andalusia. Many hundreds of thousands of girls from East Turkestan, from the ages of 14 and above, have been taken and sent into mainland China, forced to marry. Clips that you can see online, girls who are distressed even on their wedding days. And we see children taken away from their families. Imran, you and I are both fathers, so is Arsalan. We can imagine our children being taken away and being forced to basically accept that there is no God and accept Xi Jinping as a God. So at the end of the day, within our lifetimes, within 20 years, nothing will exist in East Turkestan that remotely resembles the glorious history of the Turkic people who stood up for Islam, as the Prophet ﷺ spoke about them highly all those years ago. We too should understand that this is a cause that we need to dedicate our lives to.
You know what? It was fascinating, bro. I was listening to one of the experts, and he actually referred to it as a cultural genocide, literally. Is to remove the culture of these people. And what the points you guys have made actually is highlighting why there is such a focused effort on doing this. Because to someone from the outside, they will think, okay, hold on a second. If it's merely about resources, if it's merely about, you know, the Silk Road and money, essentially, you could just, why not just, you know, just get the people to work with you? Why not just, you know, control them in other ways instead of having to go in there and change what the person is about and what they believe and who they are and what their culture is, etc. So I want you guys' thoughts on, okay, would you think there's more of a direct link between now this sort of communist ideology and outlook and it wanting to sort of go all the way as far as removing every aspect of culture and religion and Islam from the hearts of people? Because if you look at it from the perspective of history, in the Soviet Union, they saw it this way too. It wasn't just a case of working with people. It was a case of not going in there with as much propaganda as you can, putting into effect every single resource and tool you can to strip every aspect of religiosity, spirituality, the belief in God from the hearts and minds of people, right? Now, my perspective is, and I want to get your thoughts on this, and the way I see is this, that when the human being, like Allah says in the Quran, that do not be like those who forgot Allah and Allah made them forget themselves. And this gives us a great insight into the nature of a human being, that when the human being really truly recognizes its creator and is connecting or trying to connect with its creator, and therefore understands its true identity, that you are a human being created by God to know God and to worship him. And when the human being realizes this, he's no longer a slave of a system or people or ideologies. He's a slave to the creator. He's no longer a slave to created things. He's a slave to the creator of the heavens and the earth. His objective is not to make the most of this worldly life and attain as much material wealth as he can. His objective is to attain paradise, or her objective is to attain paradise. Now, from Marx's perspective, and I know Marx was one of the big thinkers in the past who actually led to the whole communist sort of outlook on life, or as an ideology. Now, his idea was, and he detested, as did other thinkers of the past, they detested the idea of the human being focusing on any way of life, in particular a religion, or the idea of God, or the idea of the hereafter and afterlife, because it detracted from them focusing on the life in this world, right? So essentially, those people that have awoken to their true nature and realize that they have a creator and they're here for a purpose, they are no longer a tool that you can use, and they're no longer you can't dispose them as you wish. You can't use them as you wish. You can't use them as a cog in the system to sort of make the system work. These people have their own identity. I really believe there is an element of this which is at play here, that there's a recognition that this way of life that these people follow, Islam, which has become a part of their culture, like Rasulullah said, it's not only about the religion, it's about removing the culture. And well, Islam becomes your culture anyway. As we know, if you're a Muslim, it becomes a part of your DNA in every aspect, right? By removing this, you actually are facilitating, benefiting from a material, worldly perspective, financial, economic perspective.
Yeah. Just before Arsalan comes in, I just want to make a quick point about that, and I want him to elaborate on it, on this issue that you've raised. You're absolutely right. Iman itself is kryptonite to the communist ideals. I just want to share something with you, Imran, right? Death is something very, very scary, or being beaten in torture chambers and all these things. These are things of nightmares. When I was speaking to the concentration camp survivor Gul Bahar, who just a few days ago, she was speaking about the fact that when they take the girls and the women and even the elderly women and they make them stay in these concentration camps, they interrogate them in a room. There's another room where these women are regularly raped, right? And she was raped and she was 53 years old. But here's the very scary part. When they take away these girls, some of them come back with head wounds. Some of them, they've been gang raped in this room, which is padded, and nobody can actually hear them screaming. Other times, women come back with their fingernails ripped out. But I just want to relate one thing that Gul Bahar said, which really shook me. Some of the girls we know did not come back. Some of them came back with their private parts violated, heads violated, different things violated. But one thing she said really stuck with me. She said she was crying as an old woman, and the young 13, 14, 15-year-old girls said, don't worry, we will be shaheed. Don't worry, we're going back to Allah. And that is Iman. Even that Iman, in that state that they had that Iman, and even under the most pressure of this communist state, Iman still comes out, and it comes out with speed lightning. And that's the reason why the communist regime is so scared. And one sister Zumarat, who initially, when she entered, I just want to share something with everybody. You see, you die the way you live. If whatever you're thinking about all the time, that's what's going to be on your lips when you die, right? So if you're listening to music all the time, we know that famous story of where there's a car crash and a policeman in Egypt went, and there was people who were basically singing songs as they were dying, right? You die the way that you live. You can't hide who you really are when you're in a time of distress. You can put on an act when you're comfortable in your house, but you can't put on an act when you're being tortured or killed or someone's just about to put a bullet in your head. Sister Zumrat, when she was being beaten, and she every day had to say there's no Allah. She had to say there's no Allah. But when she was being beaten in her cell for sharing food with a diabetic person, in her beating, in her screams, she said, Ya Allah. And when she said, Ya Allah, they automatically increased her to a high-risk prisoner from a medium-risk prisoner, because she said, Ya Allah, meaning that there was some Iman left in her. That's how dangerous Iman is. They're not scared of how muscular you are, how much money you have, or what your connections are. Your connection with Allah means you're an enemy to this communist atheist state. And that's what we need to recognize. Everything you've said is exactly correct, but the point at which it all makes sense is faith in of itself is the absolute opposite of what communist China is trying to achieve. Hence why I want everybody to recognize that this particular situation is something which will not go away. The Chinese are not going to have a bit of pressure and they're going to go away. It's going to take drastic action for this to for them to reconsider their public image.
Absolutely. So, Brother Arsalan, do you want to comment on that? Your thoughts in regards to, how communism as an ideology is directly threatened by the outlook of Islam, from the perspective that it elevates the human being to recognize their true nature and who they are, and therefore allowing them not to be such an easy puppet for any given system, that they can be controlled in that way.
Well, that's the thing. Well, we see other nations as well. The Western nations, for example, you're in the UK. I'm from Australia, and people in the United States. They have they are allowed to practice their religion, and generally speaking, Muslims are not causing any problems there. And as Brother Sabur mentioned, this Iman is a threat. Now, some of the reasons or the excuses that the Chinese regime says is that why they are putting these people in, we know the reasons, but what they are telling the world is that these people are being put in because they're extreme. And what they mean by extreme is that they have beads, they say salam alaikum, they pray, they practice Islam. These guys are extremists. Number two, second reason, separatism. So these are the three evils. Separatism, they want to be a separate state. Well, we're saying, no, we don't want to be a separate state. We want our state back. That's two totally different things. So could you imagine the Israeli government telling a Palestinian, you want to be a separatist, and a Palestinian, and we know that, no, I just want my nation back, right? Same idea. Number three, we are terrorists. You'll see some false flag, what we believe false flag operations that happen throughout China, where Uyghurs attack Chinese people, 20, 30 people die, knife attacks. And you'll see this, it's all over the net. And they're quite proud in showing these documentaries, anti-Uyghur extremist, documentaries saying that we're terrorists. And we're like, you know what? We are also a people of law and order. We are against terrorists. We would love to help you catch the terrorist. You never see, if a terrorist attack happens in the United States or in Europe, you don't see those governments lock up their local populations of of Muslims en masse. There have been some recent terrorist attacks in the UK. You guys are not locked up. You guys are free, and you're still practicing your religion. So it doesn't make sense for the actions of a few, if they were really crazy terrorist attacks, to lock up a whole people. And what the Chinese don't understand is, and what people in general have to understand, that terrorism has no religion, color, creed. You've seen what about the guy in New Zealand, the Australian fella, slaughtered 50 Muslims. You don't see the New Zealand government locking up all the white people or white men in New Zealand. So,
Imran, I just want to chime in here about something. So, what the Chinese government calls terrorism, I'll give you an example of what they are actually referring to. Uyghur workers are being outnumbered by Han Chinese, the mainland Chinese people, and they're being exported en masse, incentivized to go in and repopulate East Turkestan. And East Turkestan was 100% Turkic in the 1940s, and now it's almost 50-50. We don't know, maybe Uyghurs are less now. So Uyghurs were actually killed, and Uyghurs were killed by some Han Chinese, and some Uyghurs were protesting against the killing peacefully, and the protesters were met by violence by Han Chinese, and then the Uyghurs retaliated. And that in of itself, firstly, it's an occupied territory in which you have foreigners that have come in, foreigners who killed some local Uyghur workers. I believe there's 2 of them. Uyghurs peacefully initially protesting, who were then attacked by Han Chinese, and he has communal attacks between the 2. So even it's not the same. I would not say it's the same as, say, 7/7, in which you have a terrorist going and basically killing innocent civilians. It's not as simple as that. It's actually rioting between 2 different communities, instigated by the parasite community, which basically attacks the hosts, the people who live there, the people whose ancestors have been there. And when they simply protest, attacking them, and then when they do retaliation of the same sort of thing, police were not getting involved when the Uyghurs were being attacked. Then what happened afterwards is you had all these Uyghurs disappearing, and you had this mass slaughter and killing and rape and all of this stuff happening. So yes, China loves to use the word terrorism, but I just want to highlight something. Even though China is trying to say that Uyghurs are terrorists, Uyghurs are this, Uyghurs are that, even the United States of America, which launched the war on terror, does not buy that story. I want everybody to recognize that. The Europeans do not buy that story. There was a little bit of time after 9/11 that they did, and now they don't. You actually find the exact opposite in Europe, and in fact, even more so in America. They don't buy this idea of Uyghur terrorism. They recognize this is basically an excuse to clamp down upon all the Uyghurs. Absolutely. So I don't want anybody to be in any
absolutely, bro. That's a brilliant point, Zak, for clarification. Because look, it's as plain as day when you see what's going on. It's nothing but an excuse, because if that's the case, you wouldn't be locking up most of the population, right, for the actions of a few, right? Yeah. And because it literally it's the lockdown of the whole community, right? Because the camps are popping up all the time. How many people are in camps right now, roughly? Do you have a rough figure?
According to Ready Free Asia, the Adrian Zenz, the expert that I quoted at the beginning, he says, based on open source research that he's done, anywhere between 1 up to 1,200, possibly even more.
Wow. And that's not the only thing. So you've got even the type of house arrest that's going on, where Uyghur families have been forced to, or they have to comply and allow for other people to come in and to assess them and sort of analyze them and see what's going on. So that in itself is a type of,
Yeah, Imran, I just want to highlight something here. It's not as simple as, there's a guest that's over, right?
Yeah.
They'll pair every Han Chinese, every Uyghur with a Han Chinese person of the opposite sex. So the sister that we interviewed the other day, her name is Sister Zumrat, right? Her daughter, who is barely a teenager, she's like 12 or 14, she's very young. She was paired with a 25-year-old Han Chinese man, and she was forced that she basically was supposed to go and stay with him. Now, what do you think is going to be on the mind of a 25-year-old Han Chinese man who's probably an atheist, probably can do whatever he wants with her in his house. By Allah's grace, things turned out that didn't actually take place with Sister Zumrad's daughter. They made some sort of excuse and they escaped. But what I want everybody to recognize is these camps can be seen from space. But even if we cannot see these camps from space, the policies, they affect infants to elderly. And it's one of the leaked documents from this criminal regime has actually been from the president Xi Jinping, and that document basically says have no mercy. That is what these communists are actually told in East Turkestan, have no mercy. And at the same time that we are hearing have no mercy, we're finding Muslims even sometimes saying, well, the situation is not that bad. Some Muslims, there's always issues going on. The whole world, is in things. And what I'm trying to highlight, me, Imran, for close to 10 years now, I don't talk about other issues like I talk about this issue. And the reason simply is it's asymmetrical. All the oppression happening in the world and what's happening in East Turkestan is asymmetrical. It's in a different class of cruelty, and that's why we have to highlight it more.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, bro. And to be honest, like you made the comparison earlier to the Soviet Union, bro, in some ways, this is far more aggressive, bro, because for them, it was just a case of, okay, they had the gulag, right? But they would chuck people in that were specifically causing issues. Here you have mass populations being driven into camps. And it's absurd.
Let me give you one example. One of the brothers, alhamdulillah, he comes on my channel. His name is Muhammad Habib. He's a Palestinian brother who's very supportive of the work that we are involved in. And he was not at all offended by what I put on Twitter. In fact, he was very happy and he supported it. I made the case that if Uyghurs were sent to Gaza Strip and the West Bank and they lived under Israeli occupation, they would consider what they're going through and where they are as a holiday. They would consider it a holiday to be in Palestine under that occupation, which we know is still very difficult, still very brutal. But compared to what they're going through in East Turkestan, it would be a holiday. That's how horrible it is in East Turkestan. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that if they knew the realities, including Muhammad Habib, who was happy. Even though he's Palestinian, he was happy to endorse that statement. So that's why I want everybody to recognize East Turkestan, it deserves as loud of a voice as the Palestinian issue does.
Absolutely. Now, there's a comment here by Rainy, or I think it's Rainy7. They say, what's the end goal of all of this atrocity, all these atrocities by the CCP? What do they gain by oppression? Now, obviously, one of the things I've been discussing out of the several things is money drives the world, literally, right? And that's one of the biggest factors here, the economic issues. One thing I want to sort of touch upon is I want to juxtapose this because we always learn lessons from history. Now, what we're seeing happening here is in many ways very similar to what happened in the Soviet Union, right? And what Paul does in this book is he highlights that it was a failed experiment in secularizing people, right?
Yeah.
It failed on many different levels. Now, what they did, they had different strategies. Initially, the Bolsheviks, and which eventually resulted in the Soviet Union, the initial strategy was based on what Marx had in mind, which was, look, religion is just something people make up when they're not doing too well economically and socially. So provide those things for people and the religion will disappear, right? So they initially went with this, didn't work, right? Next step was Lenin stepped it up and said, look, okay, people are more in tune, there's a nature here, people are more in tune with rituals and practices and culture, quote unquote. Let's replace that with our own secular rituals. Let's replace that with, and this went as far as baptisms, this went as far as certain funeral rites, etc. They had their own secular versions of these rituals. That seems to be happening here to some degree as well, where their own indoctrination, their own ways have been instilled in people in these camps. That didn't work either for the Soviets, right? Because there was a census that Lenin held in 1937, according to this book. And the results were so shocking that they weren't expecting that there were so many people still on the ground that believed in a God. They couldn't knock that belief out of people, that they didn't publish the census. They made an excuse up, put it away, right? Then comes Stalin. Stalin steps up to another level. Mass murders, killing priests, religious figures, shutting down, all of the Orthodox churches. Even, similar treatment was done to the Muslims in Central Asia. Still failed. He mentions maybe, as is one of his concluding points, that today in Russia, people are experimenting with religion again. They're turning back to religion. They're turning back to God. These people, they are deeply religious, right? It was a failed project. So why don't people learn? Why don't the Chinese government understand this and see this, that they're not going to be able to achieve what they're trying to achieve? Why still push on with this sort of approach? Why do you think what's going on here? When is it going to stop?
I think they believe that they can do it better, and economically, the Soviets were nowhere to the level of China is. You got to understand that while the system socially is communistic, the economy is very much it's capitalism, and the difference between the Soviets and how the Soviets took care of their people and the Chinese is that the Soviets did actually take care of their people. That they were given free housing, they were given free hospital, they were given free education, where that's not the case in China. So they think they can just throw money out of it. And essentially, if you look at, besides the Uyghur issue, you see slowly the Chinese taking over the world, not through bombing countries back to the Stone Age, but actually lending them money. And then this process where these second and third world nations cannot pay back the money. For example, they'll build a port in Sri Lanka. They'll boost the agriculture in Brazil, and they'll do all these things and they can't pay it back. And therefore, these countries are slowly losing their sovereignty. So it's all about land. Look, recently, 4 bills in the United States are in the process of being passed. One of them is the Uyghur bill. We simply want human rights. But you know what the other 3 bills are? Recognizing Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Tibet as independent states. So the more land they use, the more power, all those resources under that. So they think, that they think they will be able to do better than the Russians. Even though that they stole this system from Europeans, they think they could synthesize communism in a way. And to be honest, if they really want to follow Marx, they should really let everyone have beards if they really want to emulate him. But they think they could do it better.
Yeah, it's what's very interesting. It seems, but I always mention this point to Sabur a few times before as well. This idea that they want to sort of remove God, religion, all of these ideas from the hearts and minds of people and make people very materialistic and atheistic, right? I want to get into this discussion in a second. But what they fail to realize is they want to do this so they can focus on the world and progress from that perspective and attain more material possessions and occupy as much of the world as they can. But as soon as you remove God and you remove the idea of God, what you're doing is you're removing all meaning from life anyway. So you're stepping, as they say, you're stumping on your own foot literally by doing that. You want to remove God to go and attain things and make the most of this world, but by doing so, you're removing all meaning from your life anyway, which is going to cause other problems. It'll be interesting to know. I haven't looked into this. Maybe you have. Are people on the ground that have become secular in China? Are they looking into the bigger questions of life? Do they have existential questions about the meaning and purpose of life? What is the state in regards to those things?
I think China have become quite successful in their brainwashing of people. And I personally see this from the Uyghurs who live freely in democratic Western nations. The Uyghurs do not realize this because just by the way that they'll tell you, no, I'm not, they're not like this. But I can see, and you sitting down with these people, they really lost their religion, and for them it's literally lip service. They are not aware of this, and they don't actually realize how communistic they've become, even though they've lived 20, 30, 40 years outside. but what's interesting is it's not until you leave that regime, because I noticed when I was there, a lot of the people, when they're practicing, obviously, the people are still practicing. They are still fasting. They are still, because even though in certain situations you can still pray, but necessarily you don't have to do the movements. You can still pray in spirit. You could be sitting down, because if you were to pray with the surveillance cameras and the people in your homes, you can't pray. So inshallah, Allah Ta'ala accept their ibadah. But once those people leave the region, and this is a test for Allah. This is a test from Allah, because from personal experience, these people, when they were under oppression, they were reading Quran, they were practicing like scholars. But once they left, they left Islam. Once they left the region, they left Islam, because they realized that they were like children. They were only practicing Islam because they were told not to do it. And so it's there are different experiences and different conversations going on, but brainwashing and indoctrination does work if it goes on for long enough.
SubhanAllah. Sabur, you want to comment on that, bro?
Yeah, and what's it called? Arsalan is absolutely correct. People, their perspectives change. You spoke about the effects of communism. So a friend from London who is a Uyghur, he basically was not practicing Islam when he was in East Turkestan. He came here to London, and even here in London, he was not practicing. And then by the time I met him in 2011, he'd actually had this road to Damascus moment where he realized what Islam is, what is the meaning of La ilaha illallah, who were the Uyghurs, what is East Turkestan about, and he became a very staunch practicing person. So I'm sad to say, and Arsalan has echoed the same, that communist propaganda does work. It does actually work. People, children, Uyghur children do tell on their parents without realizing. So their parents will say, do your parents pray? Lynn Anastasia, she is a Canadian Miss World Canada. She's a runaway from the Chinese regime. And she talks about, right now, I mean, she, in the Oxford Union, she gave a talk which was in support of a Cold War on China. So it shows you how much she hates China now. But even she said that when she was in China, she was a communist. And she used to teach other children how to be a proper communist, how to sift out traitors. And it's only when she moved to Canada that she basically realized, oh my God, this universe I was living in is a total lie. The world doesn't run like this. And now she's, a avid campaigner to end this criminal regime, even through a Cold War. So, it just goes to show you that this brainwashing does work. I did want to highlight something, Imran, which you sort of were alluding to earlier, which is generally Chinese people turning to spirituality, right? So in China, we have this movement called Falun Gong, right? And this movement exploded of these people practicing this ancient Chinese, spirituality. The government cracked down on them. The government basically started treating them like human guinea pigs, started to basically take out their organs and use them for other people and kill these people. All these horrible things happening until today. The massacres of the Falun Gong people is completely, thrown under the rug. And what's interesting is that this movement at one point seemed unstoppable in China, right? There were people practicing it in parks. It's where you basically go out and you meditate, and it just exploded, and the communists could not actually control it. And then in the last 20 years, they've absolutely smashed it to pieces. So the only people who are really practitioners of Falun Gong are those Chinese people who are outside of China, and the communists have successfully managed to absolutely oppress and obliterate a movement which was being followed by, I mean, the statistics vary, but we're talking about tens of millions of people who were practicing Falun Gong openly in public, by the way, openly in public. There's videos of these people, and now they no longer can. The communists have completely stamped down on it. But I just wanted to highlight one more thing, which I think we should talk about. Communist Russia, their propaganda was quite consistent. So the propaganda that they had internally was, we are better than the capitalist evil West, right? And they were very clear on that. And they were open like that in public and in private. The difference with this Chinese regime is that they have a different narrative internally and they have a different narrative externally. So in fact, if you go to China Uncensored, which is a great YouTube channel, you'll find that when the Chinese government is talking to their own citizens, they'll talk about the West in a derogatory way. They will have nothing but negative things to say based upon the previous wars that they had. And and they'll use language like, we will dominate the world, it's time for China, China's time has come, we're a strong military, we can do this, we can do that, we can smash the West, whatever it is. But when it comes to the external world, they basically say, China wants cooperation, we want cooperation, we want cooperation, which is essentially a strategy of Sun Tzu, which is bid your time and build your strength. So that's what they're actually doing. And they have all across universities. Imran, I know you go to all these universities across the UK. You will come across this society known as the Confucius Society, yeah, which is actually an arm of the Chinese communist regime, which is at university campuses pumping out Chinese propaganda, pro-Chinese nonsense, when Confucius and Confucianism in China itself is completely smashed to pieces by the communists because they don't want anything to do with that. But externally, they're trying to put out this olive branch, and behind their backs, they actually have daggers. So what we need to recognize is that their propaganda is far more effective, although it's inconsistent, than the Soviets, and that's what makes them so dangerous.
Mm-hmm. SubhanAllah. Bro, so I want to sort of shift the discussion a bit now as we come to the close. I want to get some thoughts from you guys. Maybe Sabur, start with you on this one. Many atheists be watching this and be like, this has nothing to do with atheism, right? This is communism. This is what's happening. This is nothing to do with atheism. You know, what's the link here? Is there a link? What do you have to say in regards to that, Sabur, bro?
So there's two things I wanted to say. The first thing is there's obviously a theological discussion here. And the theological discussion is, if there is no God, then what do you ground rights in? Okay. Now, Europe and even atheist states in Europe, they do believe in human rights, although they don't believe in God. And human rights are a byproduct of the Judeo-Christian worldview. And this is not denied even by people who do not believe in God. I recently debated Cosmic Skeptic, as you know, at Oxford. And in his opening speech, he happily admitted that. So we know this. So what we find is, I think this is very important to understand. I don't believe we should treat atheists and atheism in the Western world the same as the atheism in the communist world, a Chinese world, for the simple reason that you are shaped by your environment. So the atheists in the Western world, they will, regardless whether they can justify it properly or not, regardless whether they've thought about it or not, they will always speak about human rights because that's in their DNA and the DNA of their ancestors. And that's just part of European culture, which can never be taken away. And that culture is obviously also true in North America. So human rights, whether they can be justified or not, they're going to be spoken about in the Western world. And we should definitely use that. We should definitely ally ourselves with atheists to speak about East Turkestan, and many of them have actually shown support. However, it's a very different kettle of fish when we're speaking about atheists in China, because they haven't had a Judeo-Christian tradition. They don't have this communist, they don't have this idea of rights. In 2013, there was a document which was discovered, a leaked government document named infamously Document Number 9. This Document Number 9 was a leaked government document which was about giving a counter narrative to the Western ideals which were being propagated implicitly in China. So it's about beating Western values within China to make sure China remains in the firm grip of the Chinese of the Communist Party. And in this document, you have various things like democracy and freedom of speech and these things, which are Western ideas, by the way. This is very important. The Chinese communists recognize these are Western ideas. But also importantly, it's the Western idea of universal common rights, right? Universal human rights. The Chinese regime labels human rights a Western invention, and they do not believe this Western invention of universal human rights should be taught in China, so they have a counter narrative to that. So my takeaway from this is we definitely work with atheists in the Western world, but we shouldn't assume the atheists in communist China are going to be even 1% as decent as the atheists we come across in the Western world.
So on that point, Arsalan, so if they don't acknowledge the human rights as we understand them in the West, right, and they're simply seen or merely seen as an invention of the West, what rights, where do they get the principles and rights from? Do they have a set of principles and rights, and where do they get that from?
Well, technically, on paper, they're supposed to be getting their principles and rights from the UN. They've signed international treaties. They are part of the top 5 at the UN, and so they are openly not abiding by these. How far it goes down to where they actually get these, I'm not really sure, because together with Islam, they're getting rid of Christianity. And during when the communists first came in and took over, and they established the Communist Party in China in 1949, there was a big attack on Buddhism as well, which was their main religion, or Taoism. And they killed monks, they broke down temples, and they even, as I mentioned, they changed the Uyghur Arabic script to Latin. They also destroyed their own Chinese traditional script. So whenever you go into Google Translate, you will notice that there's a traditional Chinese and a simplified Chinese. And Mao Zedong, the first oppressor of communist China, he introduced simplified Chinese. So they've been trying very hard, and they've successfully stripped any form of compassion from the Chinese, and they haven't been able to hold on to anything, because essentially they weren't on the huck. And so as Brother Sabur mentioned, when they were slowly getting they were slowly trying to get some sort of spirituality in their life through Falun Gong, that was suppressed straight away. And if it's okay, I noticed a very good question. Someone by the name of Social Stigmatist, who's messaged at 7:46 p.m. And this is a common sort of devil plays advocate question that we normally get. If you go to 7:46 p.m., Social Stigmatist, he's got a Ad Musa. Can you see it? 7:46 p.m. If you just scroll up, if you can pop that on the screen, it's a very good question.
5:46 for us, Imran.
5:46. Okay, give me a second. I think I know where it
is. Oh, 5:46. Sorry.
5.
Social Stigmatist.
Just bear with me a second. Pull up now.
Chinese officials have denied the accusations, labeling their campaign as a de-radicalization program or vocational training to help Xinjiang residents learn Chinese and vocational skills. You know what's really funny about this? I mean, it's an absolute joke. This communist regime is an absolute joke, right? I mean, a propaganda campaign would be better formed and more coherent if it was designed by a schizophrenic pigeon than Xi Jinping. This is just stupid, right? However, just for the sake of mockery, I asked 2 of the concentration camp survivors this question. I said, so when you were locked up and all these things happened to you, rape and brutal torture and screaming and all the rest of the stuff, just before this I asked them, were you asked permission, would you like to enroll into this vocational program voluntarily, because that's the narrative that the Chinese criminal regime is giving us? And they said, no, we were taken from our house, or we were taken from our hotel, and this happened to us, and we were stripped naked, and XYZ. So, this type of narrative, I would honestly question the IQ of anybody. I mean, Social Stigmatist is just asking the question because that's just the way it's put forward. But after looking at the facts, even at surface level, I would question the IQ of anybody who basically believes 1% of what the Chinese Communist Party is actually saying. And I just want to highlight something here, Imran.
Yep.
Why are we doing this live stream? Why am I doing the live stream on my channel? Why did Hamza Sources get involved? Why did Muhammad Hijab get involved? Why did Ali Dawa get involved? Why is it that Islamic scholars are getting involved? Why is it that anybody with a decent platform should be involved, whether you're Muslim or not, or even if you don't have a platform, even if you can share on a very little level? It's simply because of this fact. China, it actually has the temperament of an insecure teenager. So as soon as you make a little comment, they go mad, they go crazy, right? And they have this thing, we are the next superpower, and they very much care about their image. They have this army known as the 50 Cent Army, a bunch of people who basically go and post content, and they're paid 50 cent per post. So they just spam, and they've been spamming my page. They're inshallah going to spam yours as well. And these people, what they don't recognize is that Allah has taught us a lesson in the Quran, and Allah has taught us about the disbelievers who persecute Muslims and kill Muslims, that they spend their wealth, they'll continue to spend their wealth, because the Chinese government is spending a huge amount of wealth on its public image, on the 50 Cent Army, on this type of social media campaign. It's costing them a lot. It's actually costing them a lot of money. So Allah makes a promise in the Quran. Allah says they're spending their money, and they're going to keep spending their money, and then they will regret it, and then they'll be overcome. So Allah tells us three things: spending, regret, and being overcome. And this has been the sunnah of Allah when it came to the Quraysh, and it's going to happen to every single empire that decides it wants to destroy Islam. And the fact is, what we need to recognize is we in the West, we have legal frameworks, we have legal protection, we have freedom of religion, we have many, many allies here, Jewish allies, we have Christian allies, atheist allies, and we have the ability to, within the laws of these countries, to speak openly like I am, and to actually advocate openly the end to these crimes against humanity. And I am telling you guys, even this very live stream is a thorn in their back. So all of us need to get involved, and there's actions from this live stream. It's not just to give you guys something to cry about, it's for you guys to take action and inshallah discharge your duty, which is upon every single person who says La ilaha illallah, to defend others who say La ilaha illallah.
Absolutely, bro. I think that's put really well, because essentially what we're getting at here is that no matter what background you come from, no matter who you are, this is a crime against humanity. Essentially, this is what it is, and this is it's open. Everyone knows. There's nothing hidden. It's right in your face. You don't need to go away and access some secret documents to figure out what's going on here. This is not conspiracy theory. This is happening in the open. This is right in front of our eyes, right? And anyone that's just has a good heart and is a good human being is going to see the atrocities of what's taking place and would want to do something about it. So absolutely, this is not just to cry over what's happening, it's to take action. And this is what I think the message that we need to conclude this on. So I want to get your take, both of you right now. Anyone that's watched this live stream, anyone that knows what's going on, has looked into it, is maybe just for the first time being informed here right now, what can they do? What should they do? You know, let's start with Ursulan, bro. Give us some practical calls to action. What could people do in this situation, bro? How can we help?
Well, firstly, I love the work that you guys do. You know when we see the likes of you, the likes of Hamza Tortis, the likes of Mohammed Hijab debate non-Muslims, atheists, people from different groups, layman Muslims, like, we want to get in on that. Oh man, I'm gonna tell this atheist, I'm gonna tell him this, and he's gonna accept Islam. Right? But then they'll come back with counter arguments that we're not necessarily prepared for. We look at the likes of Hamza Tortis, I can be like him, and that's it, I'm going to go for it and do it. And then you realize during the conversation, you're like, oh, you know what, I didn't come prepared. Or the other side will actually give their own dawah, and you start being convinced of them. So the reason why I wanted to point out this particular question is this is the narrative that is being spewed out by like CGT and Global Daily, Chinese mainstream media and their social media army. So you should equip yourself with information, educate yourself in what's happening. And when questions like this come, they're de-radicalizing the people. They're teaching the vocational schools in Chinese. Some of these people that are going into these camps are doctors, professors, football stars, actors, singers, people, echelons of society, businessmen. We have our own, the likes of Bill Gates. We have our own Warren Buffetts within weaker society, and these people are being put into the camp. So, one, educate yourself. Number two, I always talk about the Muslim students. It's Generation Z, X, Y. People that have been educated. Go to your universities. Do you have Confucius institutes in your school? How is China using its soft power? Are you going to a university where your university is a technologically based university. Is your university somehow directly or indirectly funding or doing research for the AI technology, the surveillance state that China has created, and through its surveillance technology is locking up the Uyghurs through that. So and then obviously the most simple thing, hashtagging, commenting, retweeting, sharing, getting the news out there, having conversations with your friends and family, maybe your boss, you have a conversation with your boss. There are so many things that you could do out there. This is what I would suggest, because to fight against this narrative.
Absolutely. Brother Arslan, I'm going to get Sabur to give his take on this as well. While I'm doing that, bro, can you please just quickly go through the questions on the chat side of your screen? If there's anything that stands out to you that you want to address or answer, please let me know and I'll pop it up on the screen, inshallah. Sabur?
So I just wanted to say, most of us, we are doing what's known as, including myself first, right? We're doing something known as, we've got this syndrome known as zombie scrolling syndrome. So we literally just scroll all day through our Facebook, and one moment we are watching a video of a cat playing a trick, another is a prank, another is a murder case. We just see these continuous posts, whether it's on our friends or whether it's on videos, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram, whatever we have this thing, the zombie scrolling syndrome. And this is because of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter which is released, right? And this is an extremely unproductive way of living. I find myself sometimes just scrolling through. I would say, if you want to take this issue of East Turkestan seriously, you need to be tuned in to Talk to East Turkestan Facebook, and you need to regularly watch the videos there, regularly share the videos there, so your brain isn't just filled up with lots and lots of random information, lots of random emotions. We need to recognize that, every thought is an emotion. So when you think about something, you feel an emotion. If we focus in on this issue, we will take it home. Human beings, we are likely to forget. We get very emotional, then we forget. So Talk to East Turkestan is a great page. You can also go to if you remove this for a second, Imran, this question, you will see beneath Arsalan his name, which is his Twitter handle, @Arsalan Hadayat, or Talk to East Turkestan. You can go to both of them. Imran, you can put the link in the description, inshallah.
Yep, I'm going to add it in.
Follow the page. And I want everybody, I said, Imran, how would you feel if your child was taken away? There are videos where children are being taken away. Actually, videos you will find. There's actually videos, we talk about mosques are destroyed. You will see a bulldozer smashing a mosque. We just spoke about women being forced to actually marry Han Chinese men. You will see women on their wedding days, everything is plastic, everything is fake, everything is minimal. They have these few things, and the woman, you can tell by her face, she's traumatized. So every single thing, we talk about rape victims, you will find testimony of those women talking about what basically happened to them. And when you visually see it, it's imprinted on your mind. It's imprinted on your mind. So for you to really take this cause to the next level, tell your friends and family about it, regularly share the stuff, and remember, it's having a huge impact. Every time you share it with somebody, China cares about its public view. Look how much nonsense is posted by Muslims all year round, or in Ramadan, jokes and this and that. And while this is basically happening to one part of the Ummah of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam taught us, if one part of the Ummah is in pain, the whole body is in pain. So we need to be in tune with what's happening. We need to get serious, and we need to aggressively campaign so that this takes place all across university campuses across the world. And this pressure has already forced the Chinese criminal regime to put up fake testimonies of Uyghurs saying, yeah, it was fantastic being away from my family all this long and learning Mandarin, right? You've got all this fake stuff, and China doesn't know what to do. I'll be very frank with you. They really don't know how to react. So they're giving out really half-baked propaganda stories which sometimes contradict each other. And what we're basically finding is that they've launched their own counter-narrative. They've even now, I've seen some documentaries about how Xinjiang was a great place, and people are happy. Even one of the grandchildren of one of the activists, they were brought on board. They're saying, yeah, forget her, we're having a great time, and look at them, and they're walking around having milkshakes. Really stupid things. But social media is our weapon, and we need to get on it, and get on it hard and fast.
Absolutely, bro. It's like you don't realize what's going on until you actually make the effort to realize. It's like constantly we live in a world where the wool is being pulled over our eyes. We've been plugged into all of these different devices and things and activities which are completely deluding us and distracting us of what's actually going on. And we need to literally wake up. And this is in regards to what's happening in East Turkmenistan right now. This is in regards to the views in regards to Islam and what people think of Islam. And I encourage people, even in China, those that have succumbed to this propaganda, to really, just take an objective look at things and look at what's happening there. Look at what Islam actually says. Look past the propaganda and the baggage. And what you'll see if you genuinely, objectively approach Islam is that you'll see this is a way of life which makes sense. It puts things into perspective. It answers the most fundamental questions in regards to my existence. Who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? Who is my creator? It injects the type of meaning into your life which will literally bring you to life, right? And anything other than this, if you stop and really think about it, especially the sort of atheistic communist regime which is there, and the philosophies embedding into your hearts and minds, if you sit and think about what it means in regards to your existence and the purpose of your life and who you are, you realize it's stripping you from all meaning. You have nothing, literally.
Absolutely. I just want you to add something to that. I got a call from through Arsalan from this sister, Noor Kashgar, who basically has her family in the concentration camps. And I wanted to know how on earth she was coping with this, issue. I mean, I find it difficult to be away from my children for a few hours when I go to work. What about your entire family, not being able to contact them, including your parents and your siblings? And she basically said, it's only through my faith. And that really shook me, because it's very easy to say we have Iman, la ilaha illallah. It's very easy to say that when your own family is taken away and you still are steadfast, then that shows a lot. So you're absolutely right. I mean, without Allah, how would the people even deal with this issue who are going through this? So definitely is an answer.
Allah says in the Quran that they want to extinguish the light of Allah, and Allah will perfect His light. And I really believe that people anywhere in the world, including China, if they objectively look at Islam, bro, they will realize the wool has been literally pulled over their eyes, big time. And just to clarify, because I know I've mentioned atheism several times, that I'm not. Yeah.
I just want to highlight something. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
We're not against Chinese people.
Mm-hmm.
We are for the people of Tiananmen Square. We are for the democratic movement in China, because that will absolutely get rid of this communist regime in East Turkestan. So we're for that. I think it's very important. When we say Chinese, we mean the Chinese government.
Yes.
We don't mean the Chinese people.
Yeah, we don't. That's why I wanted to make that statement, that we're not generalizing. Even when I refer to atheists, I'm not saying all atheists, but I'm specifically referring to certain atheist principles or the implications which tie in and which are resulting in some of these issues, or inflaming these issues that we're seeing in the world today.
And one more thing, when we speak about, say, Han Chinese people, we do understand they're being used to excel this oppression. But number one, they don't have choice. They have a choice. Number two, they're fed propaganda all the time, and there may be reprisals for their own family. And one Chinese person, when they were asked about the oppression against the Uyghurs, they said something horrific, but let's put it into context. They said, well, you have to kill a few chickens to scare the monkeys, right? So that's the view that some Han Chinese people have, but we as Muslims don't blame them, because they're under this regime. So our enemy is the regime. Our enemy is not the average Chinese person. And the reason why I'm reiterating this is a counter narrative to the communist regime has come up with is any criticism. If we say to China, stop raping our sisters and our daughters and our mothers, their reply is, you're racist. You're racist. You hate Chinese people. You hate, I don't know, noodles, right? We have nothing against Chinese people or Chinese food or Chinese culture. It's the communists who destroyed the Chinese culture, and it's the communists who we are against.
Absolutely.
It's not the Chinese people.
Absolutely. There's no room for racism in Islam at all in any way, shape, or form. The Chinese people are human beings just like we are. We all come from different backgrounds. We know Chinese Muslims, right? And we're actually close with, we have some very people that we're close with as well.
In the Dawah, yeah.
Yeah, it's about a specific regime and ideology, which is creating and causing havoc and oppression and destruction for, you know, people.
And it's a regime. I want everybody to recognize this. Yeah.
Yep. Brother Arsalan. Yep. Sorry, bro. Go on.
Yeah, they are regimes who they want to really test Allah. And this regime, it wants to test Allah, not only by telling people while they're beating them, you know, tell Allah to take this whip out of my hand, or telling people Allah doesn't exist, even trying to change the Quran itself. So this is a regime which has directed its eyes towards the sky and said, bring it on. Yeah. That's what this regime is doing.
Yeah, similar to some of the Meccans at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. They had exactly the same psychological state. Oh, why doesn't Allah bring the punishment down to us right now? Right. So, Brother Arsalan, any last words, any last thoughts before we wrap up today, bro? Inshallah.
Yeah, just as I mentioned, get get educated. You asked to look at one of the comments. I noticed one of the comments saying, Brother Arslan, I've heard the Chinese say this is a CIA propaganda campaign against them. So the CIA has been propagating against the Chinese for 70 years. 70, you really believe that? And right now, I can't call my loved ones. So the CIA is stopping me from calling my loved ones in East Turkestan. I can't FaceTime, I can't email, I can't WeChat, I can't do anything. The CIA is stopping the Chinese Communist Party from giving me a visa to visit. That's the CIA. So, and the Chinese Communist Party is stopping investigators and journalists from freely accessing the area. Now, journalists and some investigators have accessed the area, but they've been on stage tours. And so you'll see a lot of documentaries where the journalists go in, and instead of trying to give a sort of balanced story on the issue, the whole documentary ends up being about how they were followed 90% of the time. Why are you following journalists if you have nothing to hide? When journalists want to interview people, how come they are not allowed to interview the people freely? So that's not the CIA doing it. So, yeah.
Jazakallah khair, bro. May Allah bless you guys for coming on. Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of us and our brothers and sisters across the world, inshallah. Yeah, man. Jazakallah khair. Anything else anyone wants to say before we wrap up today? Sabur, anything?
Just log on to Talk to East Turkestan Facebook and follow Arsalan at Arsalan_Hidayat. I'll do that straight after this live.
Yes, inshallah. And if you guys have anyone that watches this post live, so you come across this video later, please leave your comments in the comment section below. Brother Arsalan, if I can ask you, maybe check in a day's time under the video and see if there's anything new that could be addressed, inshallah, that you may want to answer, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, guys. May Allah bless you. I will speak to you guys very soon. Jazakallah khair, everyone, for watching. So please, at the very least, very first thing to do is share this video on all of your social media platforms with as many people as possible, Muslim, non-Muslim, everyone, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.